there, sweet friend. Today we are talking about how to conceive of the bigger picture of homeschooling in terms of planning. How do you plan in advance for your homeschool? That's the topic we're going to be talking about today. I'm Aubrey. If you are new here, I am a Montessori guide, turned Montessori parent, turned Montessori homeschooler, and my children are now 10 and 13. But I love child development and I also love curriculum, and so I just spend a lot of my time dabbling in the child development stages, ages and stages, kind of thinking about how children grow and develop because it's amazing and fascinating to me. Hello, Bree. Good morning to you, or good afternoon, whatever it is. I've been lost today. I've been doing so much curriculum writing. This is about curriculum. And here I am taking a break from writing curriculum. I've been deep into the lower elementary curriculum. But today we are going to focus on planning. Today is all about planning. And so the reason that this came about, and the reason that I'm incorporating it into this little live Instagram series that I'm doing on Instagram is because every time I teach Homeschool of the Redwoods, which is the course that I teach for Montessori homeschoolers of primary ages, like around 2.5 to 6-ish, and now a new course for our lower elementary from about 6-ish to 9-ish. Every single time I teach these courses, parents really struggle with the planning aspect. Even having a curriculum in front of you, even knowing Montessori very deeply, we still, as homeschoolers, need to take time to sit down and look at the curriculum from a bird's eye view and really think about practically how that's going to work for us at home. So I want to remind us as we kind of go through, I'm going to walk you through my personal process, the process that I've used over and over and over as my children have gone through different ages in their development, and we've entered different periods of working with the Montessori scope and sequence. Some tips and tricks just that have worked for me along the way, and the way I have kind of led us into deeper planning without losing the flexibility that Montessori is known for and needs in order to really truly be Montessori. So what I did was I just took some notes for you, just kind of brainstormed my homeschooling adventures and kind of how I plan. And I just want to give you these tips right now in this little video. Okay, here we go. All right, so first thing I want you to know about planning is that planning your homeschool looks different, or it should look different from the way a classroom teacher does it, either in a regular not regular, but like more traditional public school type classroom versus a Montessori specific classroom. Both of those classroom ways of planning are going to be different from the way you plan as a homeschooler. So I'll tell you some of the ways that I planned as a classroom teacher, and this is also coming from having a master's in instruction and curriculum, and just like super loving curriculum planning. So as a classroom teacher, I spent a lot of my time planning, and some of it I did alone, but a lot of it was supported already for me. So I was either handed curriculum guides that were drafted out by our curriculum specialists in the admin of the school system, and that's kind of where I was on a path to going, is like being one of those people who works on curriculum, and then I just made this big depart and dove into the Montessori classroom and then into homeschooling instead of that other career path. So those people would have been support people at our public schools who were already kind of drafting out the curriculum goals based on whatever kind of state standards were deemed important at the time. And they would kind of parse out different things that we might want to be working on during different periods of the school year. So a lot of work is sometimes, hopefully, in a best situation, already done for the classroom teacher who steps into the classroom in an ideal situation. And so sometimes it was a matter of taking the planning outlines that were given to me and then practically kind of putting them into my day-to-day work with the students. Another part of the planning that we involved ourselves in the classroom was we did team planning. So every single week I would meet with the other kindergarten teachers on my team, and as the team leader, I would just kind of lead us in a little planning session. We would work together, we would brainstorm for activities together, we would collaborate, and then the next week we each had things to bring to the table to provide each other to round out that support system for each other. And so it was very much a team effort to plan. Now this is different, of course, from the Montessori way of planning, which is in the classroom. So if you are a primary Montessori guide, you are probably not planning specifically in that kind of a way. You already have the scope and sequence of the materials already in your classroom. You already have, worked really hard to memorize the proper procedure for lesson giving for each of these materials. So you already have like that knowledge inside your head. You have the materials out in front of you, and all you really need to do is focus on observing your child, or all of the children in the classroom, and then documenting what they do and giving lessons to children that seem like they would be ready for the next work, okay? And it's not to say that one of those planning methods is easier than the other, it's just kind of different. But what we do as homeschoolers is even more different, okay? We don't necessarily have a whole classroom full of materials out in front of us to just go and like systematically choose and go through with our, couple children that live with us. So most of us have to do both. The hands-on writing down planning and the organization of materials and preparing of the environment itself. Okay, and in lower elementary, classroom teachers who are in the lower elementary Montessori classroom, they would take it a step further and they would do a lot more of that planning out on paper as well, making sure that all these lessons can be covered throughout the year because they're probably working with small groups. So as homeschoolers, here are some tips for success, because planning can just be a lot. It can feel like a lot. It can feel overwhelming to homeschoolers who are trying to do all these things at home, create their own curriculum, purchase curriculum, blend. A lot of us are blending curriculum. So maybe we buy a reading curriculum from this vendor. We decide to use Montessori as our spine, but then we buy a spelling program, and then we're like using a different math program, and we're kind of incorporating this all together. Maybe a little Waldorfiness in there too, the spiritual forest school stuff going on. And so most of us as homeschoolers, we just kind of reach out into the universe. We see whatever has been planned for other people, and maybe we kind of piece these things together. And so then the job of the homeschooler is then to put these things together into kind of a cohesive plan that works for their child. And every child is different. So your child might really jive with this one method, but not with another. You might have a child who needs more structure. You might have a child that does very, very well with a spontaneous approach, doesn't really want to do anything that's specifically on a list. Another child might love the checklist approach and just want to march themselves on through a list of skills, okay, that they would be aware of themselves. And so here is what I suggest you do. If you are embarking on this journey, you're feeling overwhelmed, and you're ready to start planning, not just for a week, but like long term, like for the year, or at least for 6 months ahead of time. All right, so this is what I did. So the first suggestion is to start with what you already have. Before you go hunting curriculum, even taking courses, okay, before you do that, I would really look around your environment and see what's around you. Do you live in an area full of some natural resources that are really spectacular that you want to make part of your child's homeschool? Do you have an abundance of toys? I have a mother-in-law who totally overbought stuff for us for all the Christmas and all the birthdays, and boy, we just had more toys than I could deal with. Okay, and my process was decluttering all of these toys, but still starting from what you have. If you've got toys, you're going to start cultivating your environment, and you're just going to use what you have inside your homeschool. So I would recommend, before you go purchasing anything else, take stock of what is already inside your home. You know, maybe the people that you have in your circle who could teach your children things. Do you have a friend who is an artist like I do? Bonus. Do you, do either of your parents have specialties in a certain aspect of education that you might be able to pull from as a resource? Okay, so taking stock of those things first before purchasing is a really, really good idea. Something else that homeschoolers tend to do is we tend to go into these periods of panic where all of a sudden we feel like, oh my gosh, my rhythm is off and my schedule is off and I need to do this homeschool thing and I need to get it all done, and I won't feel better until I have all of my curriculum and everything is listed out in order exactly what we're doing. I have felt this every single year, usually every 6 months or so, okay, so which means I'm kind of going through it right now with both of my kids. So usually for me, it's like an August frenzy and a January frenzy of like trying to get ourselves back on track, trying to reevaluate what curriculum worked for us, what didn't, what subjects areas we went far enough in and we can just kind of pause for a while, what subjects we haven't done any of in like the last 2 months of that we really need to dig into to kind of fill in the gaps. And so my inclination is to go hunt online, scout, those websites that list all the different kinds of good curriculums for this or that subject area, and then go and just binge on reading through all these different curriculums and trying to decide if I want to spend this $300 here or this $200 here or whatever. And what usually happens after that is I feel the overwhelm of all this stuff that is out there for me to possibly consume, for me to possibly incorporate into my child's life. And I kind of just make notes of that, the things that I might be interested in, and then I just sit back down with what we actually have and I think, but do we actually have anything that already fills that need? Am I just looking for something to purchase to solve a problem? Okay, and often we are. We're just looking for, we're feeling the pain of overwhelm. We look for something to buy and we try and just solve that problem by buying it. And so if you are in that point, ever in that point where you're feeling like, oh, I just have to spend, this much money, I'm just going to have to do it because I can't do this by myself, just know that it is normal. It's normal for you to feel that way. And also you can reset yourself and say, you know what, I might not have all these different things that people recommend, all these different materials that I could buy. I don't have a multiplication board. I don't have a set of bronze stairs or whatever it is that you're using. But how could I use that? How could I, do I have something already at home that already can teach my child these concepts? And often you do. Often you'll say, I don't have golden beads, but I've got got a bag of pinto beans, and I could use those to teach multiplication, and you can kind of calm yourself down that way. So that goes along with tip number 2, which is to get inspired by other homeschoolers. And this can be kind of grounding for you too. So I know COVID is really hard right now. It's hard to communicate maybe with your fellow homeschooling peers. But if you can find a group in any way, it could be an online community, or it could be just texting another friend who's also homeschooling, who has kids around your kids' age, and just do some brainstorming with them. Let them tell you what their curriculum plans are. And chances are it's a lot more simple than you were thinking you had. Most of us as homeschoolers, we don't, it's just not possible to include all of the possible subject areas that they are supposedly teaching in school at one time. Like, we just can't do it. Like, we're one person, we've got just 1 or 2 children, 3 children, 4 children, whatever, a few children. And it's just not possible to teach children in that well-rounded way that we seem to expect children to get out of school. And so it's much better to pinpoint something that you want to focus on. Just pick one thing to incorporate into your homeschool life at a time. And then, once that is really going well, maybe it's math for you, maybe it's reading. For us, because my youngest was struggling with reading for a period, we just chucked everything out the window and we just focused on reading for a while. So as a homeschooler, as a classroom teacher, you can't really do that. You can't justify to the parents, oh, I only decided to teach math for the next month or two because I feel like it. But you can as a homeschooler. It's okay to pare things down and to only really just hone in and do a deep dive on one subject area for a while. Okay, so talking to those other homeschoolers should do two things. It should, one, calm you down, let you know that other people are in the same place, they're making the same kind of decisions that you are, they're finding their way, and as they're revealing what their plans are, you're helping to solidify your own plans, okay? So it's also inspiring you to go and look up things you haven't looked up before, or just to keep you in check of realizing that most people aren't doing it all either, okay? So the next thing I recommend you do at that point, after you have sourced, you have looked at all of your sources and seen what you can bring into your home, what you already have, you've gotten your social support, you've done your binging and your panicking and your frenzying, and you're ready to move forward, okay? What do you do at this point? You need to assess your child, because this is the child that you are going to, whatever child that you're focusing on at the moment for this curriculum that you're putting together, this child has big strengths. This child has big weaknesses. We all do. This child has interests in some things, or this child might be going through a period where they just don't seem to be interested in anything, okay? But your child is going to be unique. And so you've got to assess your own child before you can know if you need to add anything to your homeschool curriculum toolkit at all. So an example of the way I did this is every single 6 months to a year or so, at least every year, usually every 6 months, I would just write down my child's name. I have 2 children, so I would make a T-chart like this, and I would put one child's name here, the other child's name here, and then I would go through subject area. I would just write all the subjects down: reading, math, science, geography, and then I would kind of think about how each child is doing in those subject areas, okay? I would think about which of these subjects is my child super strong already in. Is there anything that I don't really need to go overboard and teach my child because they're already doing it, they're already interested in that thing? For my oldest, it was science. He was so fascinated with science. We just did science as part of our natural homeschooling life, and I didn't have to go out and buy a science curriculum. I just never did that for that child, because going to the library and just checking out some books on science and looking up experiments online was enough for him. He was so interested in it that we just naturally did this as part of our life anyway. And so there was no need for me to go seek out a specific science curriculum just because some standards said you're supposed to do some specific science for that child. That child was already doing it, okay? Already ahead in that area. But that same child needed more structured math instruction. That same child did not need a lot of reading instruction. He was reading great by the time he was in lower elementary, but that child did need handwriting practice. And so what I would do on that list is I would just circle the things that were really, really strong in, and I would just decide, okay, we're going to keep going with those things. And then I would put a little star or a little check or something else next to the subject areas that I felt like were weaknesses of ours as a family or were deficiencies of that child in particular that they needed more of. And then I would really just focus on those needful subjects, and I would just let the rest go. And that really pared down what I was trying to look for in terms of curriculum. Okay, so that was something that was really, really helpful to me. And I hope you try this with your own child, really thinking about the whole child, drawing a circle. That might be a nice way to do it too. And you could color it in Waldorf rainbow style if you wanted, and make yourself a beautiful little chart of how your child is doing in the different subject areas. I think that would be lovely. And tag me if you do it. I would love to see it. Or send me a DM. I'd just love to see. So then you need to also remember that as homeschoolers, we are not just homeschooling the one child, we are part of a family unit. And so what we're doing in homeschooling is not trying to create a school for that one child and make sure that one child gets in all those subject areas. We are trying to create a rhythm that works for our family. And so in this curriculum, research planning frenzy phase that you're in, whenever you're in that, okay, might not be in it right now, but whenever you find yourself there as a homeschooler, and you will, because that is what we homeschoolers do, you need to be writing down things for yourself too, okay? So as you're making a list for your children, you need to make a list for yourself. What are you really good at? What are your strengths? And circle those things, okay? Is there something that you're naturally really good at that you want to share with your children? For me, it's linguistics. I have an almost master's degree, so it's an almost master's in general linguistics, because I just fell in love with poetry and the study of language when I was in college, and I was a young thing before I transitioned into the Department of Education later on. And so linguistics was something that I taught both of my children because I just had this innate love of it and it felt intuitive to me. And so that became part of what I felt like I could personally offer my children in terms of something that they would learn from me, all right? Genuinely and spontaneously, that I would kind of integrate in. So whatever it is for you, if poetry is your thing, then put a little star around that. If math is something you really excel in, I want you to use that time during your planning period to celebrate that part of yourself and to reaffirm that you're going to be a good teacher in the subject area, because you will be. Okay? If you love something, you can teach something. And then you're also going to want to get clear on what you don't love. Okay? Is there anything that you feel like you have a personal weakness in? So you kind of evaluated your children. Now you're evaluating yourself. Is there something that you are struggling with, okay, or that you feel like you can't teach very well naturally and spontaneously? And I'll tell you something funny. When I had all these conversations with unschoolers at my local park days, when we would just evolve into talking about curriculum, and for unschoolers, curriculum is often a dirty word, because the opposite of curriculum is the kind of freedom that unschoolers embody, right? But here I love curriculum. And I don't think it's a dirty word. I think it's a great word. It's just a way for us to think about our structure of our days, structure of the subject areas. But anyway, I would be talking with them, and I would mention something like, I feel really insecure with teaching math. Like I love the Montessori math curriculum, but I know it's a weakness of mine. And so I just feel like, teaching math is just hard for me, and I need more structure and support. And some of the friends around me, they would look at me and they would say, but math is everywhere. Math, and it is. We just covered this in lower elementary. Those of you who are watching are in that course. It is everywhere. It's patterns. It's amazing. There's so much to love about math, and there's so much you can teach about math that is spontaneous. But I am not the kind of person who can do that. Okay? Somebody else who has a better relationship with math, somebody who has always loved math and has always felt confident and successful with math, maybe you don't need a math curriculum. Maybe you can just pull it out as you go and explore the world. You're teaching your child about geometrical figures and measurements, and you're playing with money because you do accounting for a living, and you are teaching your child about how spreadsheets work from when they're very little, okay? That is not something that felt intuitive to me. And so math curriculum was something that I invested in separately, even in addition to the Montessori curriculum that I already had. I just wanted extra support with it. I felt like I needed the extra guidance, the extra structure. And then we didn't necessarily follow that curriculum to a T, but I felt like I had a resource that was grounded that I could pull from. Okay, I see some questions in here. New Montessori. This is not from the Prepared Homeschooler Workshop. This is just me chatting with you about the topic of homeschooling and planning. If you guys want to go deeper into this, I offer a free mini course called Well, it's basically called just like a Montessori Homeschool Planner. You can find it on my website at childoftheredwoods.com, and it's like a little series of lectures about specifically planning with the homeschool planner that I created. So you could go further and do that, and I will be teaching workshops later on in the year, but it won't be this exact content because I'm just riffing here, okay? Love you. Mwah. Okay, so you're incorporating your own strengths, your own needs, and you're just doing this brainstorming. You're like writing this down, and you're not judging yourself or your child. You're just kind of making this list of strengths and weaknesses and resources and interests on here. And then the next step after this is you're gonna, after you've thought about your family's rhythm, what's reasonable for you to do as a family, kind of where your interest lies and where your child's interest lies, you're gonna pick a few of these things to really focus on. You're not gonna try and teach the whole thing, okay? You're gonna just pick a subject at a time to work on. One of those subjects that you feel like you could use some more support in and more structure in, and that is what you're gonna do your planning in first. And so I always do my planning not as a whole incorporated thing, but just kind of subject by subject at first. And so if I were gonna pick something like math, what I would do is I would first give myself a bird's eye view of whatever curriculum I'm going to use as the spine of my homeschool. So whether it is Montessori math, okay, and those of you in my courses know you have a bird's eye view already in that scope and sequence that I've given you. And it's in the primary, it's called your monster list of Montessori activities. In lower elementary, you know that I am writing it as we go. So you know your lesson activity list as you've gotten them. So you're just gonna look through. But if you have a textbook or if you've purchased a different math program, whatever it is, you're gonna look through and you're not gonna start with lesson number 1, okay? That is an approach that will eventually get you there. But I think it's much better if you first flip through and look through that table of contents and really take it in. What is to be covered ideally this year, okay? Like long term, what are we aiming for? And so in math, it might be something like, you might think, oh, okay, this is like third grade math, pretty serious here. I bet we're gonna do a lot. But then you look at it and you realize, okay, like this is actually mainly about like learning your multiplication facts, memorizing your multiplication facts, learning some long, some higher level like division problems, bigger multiplication problems, and then you've got like time and money. Okay, so it's not going to be as big as you think it will be once you look at the bird's eye view. And after you do that, then what I do is I sit down and I actually write down, I kind of copy over the table of contents with whatever I'm looking at, whether it's the Montessori scope and sequence, whether it's bringing in another math curriculum resource. I just start to write down my topics in a big list, and then I start to think in terms of 3 months chunks, okay? For me, 3 months is like the magic number. Thinking about 6 months ahead is too far for my brain to really think about what my child is going to be, because there has to be flexibility in there. And so thinking in terms of 3 months gives us flexibility, that if we don't get to something, that there's still time to catch up. And also it just helps me to arrange the whole year. So it's 3 months at a time, and then I just start blocking things out. We're gonna work on these concepts during these 3 months, these concepts during these 3 months, and so on until I get to the end of the year. And I might do this at just 6 months at a time, so 2 chunks of 3 months, or I might do the whole year sometimes. It just depends. I've done it different ways during different years. And from there, once you've got your blocked, then you're going to go down further, and then you're looking at a month at a time. So then you're going to start pulling it out into a monthly, and then from there you can pull it out into a weekly. But usually I don't pull out the whole year into a weekly or even a monthly. I do the 3 months, and then I work with the first 3 months at a time, and pull the things out that I feel like we're going to then kind of get a calendar going, kind of sketch out, this week I want to focus on this week I want to focus on this. And it might, sometimes it's page numbers if your curriculum is structured like that, pages this to this. Like in a reading curriculum that we're doing, it is kind of like this many lessons in this amount of time, and I'm going to space them out, make sure that we're kind of on track with that. But with others, it might not be. You can even do this with themes. In Constellation, the monthly membership group that I host, we create 3 themes for you. And so these themes that we're generating right now are kind of more cultural themes that we integrate into the Montessori method that I totally would do in the classroom with children. So it's things like, well, this month is redwood. And so we're kind of learning about, we're exploring measurements, at the size of the trees, and we're exploring biology and botany with the leaves and the rings of the redwood trees themselves and such, so on, okay? So if you want to do a theme approach, that's perfectly fine. You would kind of be thinking ahead of time of what kinds of themes your child might be interested in, and this is a time to pull your child in and ask them if this is something that they would like to be doing too, especially for those children who are older. I met a homeschooling mom who used the theme approach beautifully. She said she did it actually week by week. Every week she would ask her children, or actually month by month, every month, the beginning of the month, she would ask her children kind of what they would brainstorm together as a family on a big board. They would write down a whole bunch of ideas about things that they wanted to learn about. And it might be something relevant to their local area, or it might be something that was kind of far across the world geographically. And then they would make these little lists of topics and they would kind of sketch it out themselves. And I think making these lists with your children, the more you can involve your children in the curriculum planning, the more successful it might end up being for you guys in the long haul too. And so those are my tips for kind of how I do my own curriculum planning. And yes, it takes time. It takes a lot more time in the beginning. And I don't sit down and just do it in an hour. It's something where I start kind of feeling that buzzy. I need to be working on curriculum for my kids and get my homeschool stuff in gear again. I feel like things have worked for a while, and we've kind of ended some things. We're kind of in the middle of things. Maybe some classes have ended and we've got kind of a gap amount of time. We're about to get over that gap, and my oldest is about to start classes again. He's 13 now, so he's taking a lot of online classes. So what I want you to do for this really is to think broadly, to not neglect yourself in this whole planning process, and to integrate into your planning a lot of flexibility, okay? And I think if you plan more like 3 months, 3 months at a time specifically, and then an overview of the year in 3 months chunks, that gives you room to change things up. And so you can test things out for that first 3 months and see, okay, this flow is working for us. This flow is not working for us. This subject is super interesting, loving it. This subject we need to throw out. And then you would kind of adjust the rest of the year out based on that. Okay, so resist overscheduling your kids. I know that when you are feeling that panicky frenzy, you really feel the need to fill all of your child's time with something and to round out their whole educational experience, but resist that, because in Montessori we know that children need lots of unstructured time. It's much more important for children to have unstructured time engaging with the world than it is for you to actually give them a lesson, okay? And most of us expect too much of ourselves, and most of us also expect too much of our children. We may end up making a list that feels confining to us, okay? So when you're doing this brainstorming, make sure to leave big pockets open for possibilities within your pacing, all right? That is our session for today, our fun and fancy Instagram live. Aubrey riffs on homeschooling and makes it into a little academic lecture time together. Thank you for hanging out with me, and hopefully, I definitely will see you next weekend. I'm going to be doing an Instagram live collaboration with Mama in the Rain, Marie, and so that's actually going to air on her account, and I'll give you a little heads up about when that is going to happen, okay? Talk to you guys later. Have a beautiful rest of your Sunday, and I'll see you next time. Mwah.